Hello YouTube and welcome to the nation of free to play. I'm Mr. Mondstadt and today we need to talk about a topic that affects all of us, but especially F2P players, and that unfortunately became more and more of an issue in Genshin Impact: power creep. I will look at the current situation in the game, give you my unbiased opinion on how bad it is, and also tell you how more power creep could solve the problem for us, so make sure to stick around till the end. First of all, what exactly is power creep? Well, power creep is the situation where successive updates or expansions to a game introduce more powerful units or abilities, leaving the older ones underpowered. So, in Genshin in particular, if new characters that are introduced later in the game are far stronger than early units of the same rarity. One example would be Mawika. She's a 5-star Pyro Claymore DPS who was released in version 5.3, and I think it is fair to say that she is a lot stronger than Diluc, a 5-star Pyro Claymore DPS who was released in version 1.0. The same is true for support units like shielders, buffers or healers. So far so obvious. The next question is, why is power creep a thing at all? Well, Genshin is a gacha game that only makes money if players spend money to pull for their characters, and if Mawika would be the same strength as Diluc, why should we pull for her in the first place? That is why in basically any gacha game, units will get stronger over time. Also, before I continue, I want to make clear that power creep in Genshin Impact is still not nearly as bad as it is in other games. Especially if you consider that Genshin is over 4 years old by now. So overall it could be way worse, but that does not mean that everything is perfect as it is. I used the example of Mawika vs Diluc, and I assume nobody watching would actually complain about this fact. On the contrary, we want the Pyro Archon to be stronger than a 1.0 standard unit. We want to hit bigger numbers the longer we play the game, and we want harder content so we can make use of our well-invested accounts and characters. So power creep in itself does not have to be something bad, but the decisive factor is time. There were over 4 years between Mawika's and Diluc's release, but there were only a couple of months between Mawika and Arlecchino. And now we start to see the actual problem. Players who pulled for Arlecchino are now facing an even more powerful Pyro unit, and if you want to hit the highest numbers, you already have to upgrade your Pyro DPS again. Now, one could argue whether Mawika is actually stronger than the Knave. Personally, I think Arlecchino is better for most F2P accounts. But if you only look at the numbers, peak damage, damage per rotation and so on, we have a new DPS queen. Hence, some players get mad because of that rather short time interval between the old and the new best in slot, but power creep is more than that. A second big factor is the increase of opponent strengths, which you can see best in Spiral Abyss. If you look at the HP of the Abyss floor 12 opponents over time, you will notice a steady but big increase. However, until recently, you could still 36 star with your favorite characters, even if they were released early in the game. They need a lot more investment than newer units, sure, but if you really want to, you could still clear. But in the last couple of Abysses, and that is where my personal complaint comes in as an F2P, you could not just use anybody you wanted to play. The higher HP enemies is one thing, but it gets really annoying when you simply cannot play some characters because you need Furina or Geo or Pyro or Night Soul or Bow to beat an enemy in time. And while one restriction per Abyss is fine, if you combine multiple, you basically tell the players that they are cooked if you don't have the unit that the devs had in mind. The current Spiral Abyss is the perfect example for this. You kinda want Pyro for the Mountain King, even though you can get away without. But then you basically need Cryo for the second floor to stunt this guy and bring him down. Also, he's super hydro resistant, so Mualani and Novi are kinda scuffed to play against him. In the second half, you need a lot of elemental application or a lot of Night Soul to break the shields in time. This all becomes even worse if you include the leyline buffs as well. Pyro damage buff for normal attacks in the first and Night Soul buff in the second half. Now I really wonder who the devs had in mind. I admit it, I wanted to upload my Abyss Clear this time again, but I couldn't find a team combo that 36 starred everything. I still got all the rewards, but I had to change teams in between. That's why there was no video this time. I ended up using Mavuika for the most annoying chambers on both sides, and she made it look easy, but my other teams didn't even come close. I don't know about you guys, but for me, this sucks. If you are a returning player and you didn't pull in the last year or so, you're kinda screwed. You really are dependent on newer characters by now, because for my account it would be very difficult to clear all endgame without any Fontaine or Natlan units. So this is the first big issue with Genshin's power creep. There are too many new broken 5-star units that simply outperform the older characters. And the more new units we get, the more obvious it becomes. Who's still pulling for Hutao with Arlequin and Mavuika? Who's still getting Ayato with Nuviet or Mualani? But there's a second power creep problem, and this is one that nobody really talks about because there's one element in Genshin that needs way more power creep: 4-star units. When we talk about power creep, we usually have limited 5-star units in mind. But what about the 4-star characters? Do we face a similar problem here? The answer is no, quite the opposite actually. If we look at the best 4-star units in the game, who are we talking about? Bennett, Fischl, Xingqiu, Sucrose, Xiangling. All of them were released in version 1.0 when the game started. And none of them have been power crept by another 4-star unit so far. I'd even argue they have not been power crept at all, not even by 5 stars. This is the other big issue with Genshin's strategy. While they keep releasing more and more broken 5 stars that outperform the older ones, they hardly do that for 4 stars. Sure, they release one good character from time to time, Kuki, Chevrus, Lanyan, but neither of them are upgrades to older 4 stars. They are alternatives, they enable different team comps or playstyles, but they are not better than the 1.0 units. From a business position, this makes sense. New 4 stars are released to support certain 5 stars, but not enough that you can skip the 5 star. Chevrus released with Raiden and Yoimiya's rerun in 4.3. Auron was meant to support Chaska initially. Lanyan is amazing with Arlecchino. And don't get me wrong, I really appreciate these characters and the fact that you can get them easier than limited 5 stars, but when we're talking about the recent power creep increase in Genshin, they are not enough to counterbalance the current development. 4-star Abyss clears were a typical challenge, but recently they became more and more difficult to pull off, and even well-invested accounts of content creators had a very hard time if they could 36 star at all. Me, I don't even bother trying, especially without C6 units. If the power creep of Genshin was consistent though, this might be a solution to the problem. If Xiangling was no longer the best 4-star pyro sub DPS, if you could play a better attack buffer than Bennett, if there was official 2.0, but there is not. If this trend continues, Genshin's endgame might look similar to Honkai Star Rail's Memory of Chaos soon. If you don't have the new 5-star on banners right now, you will not be able to clear all the content. As an F2P player, I really hope this will not happen. So, to sum things up, the two biggest issues with power creep in Genshin is first, time, meaning the time between the new strongest unit and its older version, and the focus on 5 stars only. In conclusion, Genshin should make sure that they don't overdo it and give the player base a reasonable amount of time to adapt to the changing meta before they change it yet again. For now, Mavuika is probably the highest peak damage in the game. Let us adapt a bit. Give her at least 1 or 2 reruns before you release the next upgrade, the DPS that hits even more with the burst and so on. However, if you look at the teased characters, I have my doubts and there might be yet another DPS queen coming sooner than later. Let's see, maybe I'm wrong. I really like Genshin and I enjoy playing the game, but once the endgame becomes a character check instead of a build or skill test, I will be less interested. Anyway, these are my thoughts on the power creep situation in Tibet. What are your thoughts on the topic? Do you think power creep is an issue already? And would you like to see stronger 4-star units as well? Let me know and share your opinion in the comments down below. Also, if you like this video, please leave a thumbs up or subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!